Jason McNew of Appalachian Technologies here, and this is Security Snark, where we discuss all the cybersecurity news that's worth discussing. And this week on Security Snark, coming from the Federal Trade Commission, here are some tips to defeat ransomware. An FBI email server was hacked and spam was sent from an FBI email account. That's interesting. A Russian intelligence agency is linked to a hacker group. That is not a surprise. And the U.S. baseball group computer network was hacked and the owners were extorted. Bad news for sports fans. And first up this week comes this piece from bleepingcomputer.com. FTC, that's the Federal Trade Commission, shares ransomware defense tips for small U.S. businesses. U.S. businesses are small businesses are the backbone of the United States economy. There's millions of them. They're at risk, and it seems like ransomware is something that we talk about nonstop. And it's kind of like the flu, right? And washing your hands. The flu is a problem. It's not going away. And we know all the things that we should be doing in order to not get sick, right? Wash your hands, not touch your eyes, not touch your face, cover your mouth when you cough, and all these other things. But it seems like a lot of small businesses and big businesses, for that matter, aren't getting it. Now, think about this for a moment. A risk is defined as probability and impact, okay? In the simplest terms possible. And both the probability and the impact of a ransomware attack on a small business are both very high. We've all seen the statistics battered around in the news. Something like half of U.S. businesses go out of business within 6 months of a ransomware attack. And the reason why these things happen is mainly for monetization purposes. So they're out there trying to make money. They're attacking small businesses, and it keeps happening because no matter what happens, it works, right? They do this because it works. And in telling small businesses and big businesses and every other enterprise what to do or how to prevent these kinds of things, again, is like telling little kids to wash their hands and not touch their face and these other things. I kind of feel like it's falling on deaf ears and they need to keep hearing it. But once again, here's another resource that's talking about this. And I'll go over this briefly. Keep your network patched and make sure all of your software is up to date. It's a constant problem when you do assessments. We're still finding that companies don't do this. Back your systems up regularly and keep those backups separate from your network. Practice good cyber hygiene. Know what devices are attached to your networks. You can identify your exposure to malware. Implement technical measures that can mitigate risk. Be prepared because you're going to get hit. I say this all the time, but think of your network as like a house on the coast of Florida. It's going to get hit at some point. It's coming in. And then lastly, train your employees on how to recognize phishing attacks and other forms of social engineering. Phishing attacks are still so common because they work and people aren't trained. And when we do these penetration tests, that's when a company hires us to come in and then hack you, so to speak. And social engineering works, right? When we can't get to the technical controls, then we're going to trick people into making bad decisions. But again, article on Bleeping Computer, more resources. There's always resources from CISA, and now this one coming from the Federal Trade Commission. Continuing to beat this drum, small businesses, ransomware attacks. You need to go ahead and get prepared for that because it's going to happen. Next up comes a second piece from Bleeping Computer. FBI system hacked to email urgent warning about fake cyber attacks. Now, this is particularly disturbing because one of the things that we always harp on in the cybersecurity world is to check the source of your emails, right? Check your links, and there's various protections that you could put in place, spam filtering and so on and so forth. But these emails actually came from the FBI email server, and they were legitimate in that regard. It's just that the contents of them were fake. And the emails pretended to warn about a sophisticated chain attack from an advanced threat actor. And this information is coming from Spamhaus, and they had noticed, and Spamhaus is a nonprofit that tracks spam worldwide, and they noticed tens of thousands of these messages were being delivered in waves early on the morning of November 13th. And the FBI is still investigating this, and these actually came from the FBI's email servers. The headers are valid. And they contained a payload that said something something along these lines. Our intelligence monitoring indicates exfiltration of several of your virtualized clusters in a sophisticated chain attack. So the payload was believable, and the FBI is still responding to this. And this just goes to show why defense in depth is so important, right? Because in this case, you could have you could have various technical controls in place, spam filtering, sandboxing, and so on and so forth. And here you have an email that comes legitimately from the FBI that has a fake payload, and this is why you need to train your people and then have other compensating and mitigating controls in place. Advanced malware protection, protective technology, and so forth, because this is a case of the FBI failing, and then this would get through certain defenses of your own. It might get past your people, and then we need to figure out how to mitigate it past that. So once again, more interesting news in the cybersecurity world. Next up, from SecurityWeek.com, Ukraine names Russian FSB officers involved in Gamerdawn, I believe that's how you pronounce that, cyber attacks. FSB, the Russian FSB, that's the Federal Security Service, which is the successor organization to the KGB. The FSB was run by Vladimir Putin before he was installed as president in 2000 by Yeltsin. And in any case, it's similar to our CIA or the MI6 in Britain, and it is involved primarily with foreign operations. But one of the things that, so according to the SBU, which is the Ukrainian Security Services, 5 individuals are employees of Russia's Federal Security Service, and the names the names of the 5 and their role in the FSB have been made public. And they go on to say the Ukrainian Special Service revealed the identities of the intruders, obtained incontrovertible evidence of their illegal activity, including interception of their phone calls. SSU has done it despite the fact that the criminals used the FSB's own malware, which is interesting, as well as means of anonymization and covers on the internet, the SBU said. So these are members of the FSB. And what that means is they're employees of Russia, but they're also operating as part of a clandestine or a crime group. So this will be akin to members of the FBI or the CIA working along with the mafia, right? And most Americans don't realize this, most people in the West don't realize this, but that's actually a fairly common arrangement in Russia. There is not a whole lot of shoulder room between the state security services, the organs of the state, so to speak, and organized crime, and it's not unusual for those people to go back and forth. There was a lot of that going on back years ago. It's been going on for 20 years ago, or more than 20 years. But in any case, the Ukrainians have published a 35-page report written in English, interestingly enough. So that shows you that their audience for this is the English-speaking world, and they're looking for help from America and from Europe on this. But there's always there's been a long rivalry going on between Ukraine and Russia, which continues. And if you didn't know, Kiev, which is the capital of Ukraine, was actually the capital of Russia up until 1350, until the Mongols invaded Asia, and they were run out of there 250 years later by Ivan the Great, I believe. But there's always been a rivalry there, and there's a lot of political, social, ethnic, and economic ties between Russia and the Ukraine that continue, and it leads to a lot of friction there, and a lot of that bleeds over into the cyber realm. It's very, very interesting. And finally comes this piece from Ars Technica. Pirate site operator hacked MLB, that's the Major League Baseball, and tried to extort $150,000, the feds say. It's a pirate website operator named Joshua Street was charged with hacking into MLB computer systems and trying to extort $150,000 from the league by threatening to publicize security vulnerabilities, the U.S. Department of Justice announced. And evidently, this guy had been streaming their sports content illegally for the last 5 years and charging $100 a year for unlimited content. So he was already exploiting the system. He had gained unauthorized access to what is known as a CDN, or a content delivery network, that was had various protections in place through Cloudflare and some other things. So it was a relatively sophisticated operation. So he was stealing the MLB's content that they were charging $129 a year for, and then selling it for $100 a year, and then pocketing all of that. So he had been doing this for a couple of years, and then finally he got a little bit even greedier, and he decided that he had evidently had gained unauthorized access to the MLB's content delivery network using some type of a bug, an exploit, and he was trying to sell the exploit, and this is known as kind of a bug bounty, more or less, to the MLB, who notified probably the FBI and the DOJ. And in any case, the FBI set up a sting operation, and they caught this guy. So, the one thing with these guys is they always get, number one, they always get greedy. And they always get lazier, and they make mistakes at some point. This kind of sounds like, if you remember the Silk Road on the dark web and the Dread Pirate Roberts, that was his handle. And he eventually got greedy, and he eventually got sloppy, so that these guys always get caught. But in any case, the MLB is saying that they lost around $3 million over this. So interesting, targeting the MLB. People will target anything and everything when they're trying to make a buck. And that's it for this week's installment of Security Snark.